Right. Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to this third event in the Swedish Chamber's virtual discussion series, Emerging Stronger. This series is now running close to a year old and was really introduced as a discussion platform for businesses and communities coming together, discussing how to emerge stronger on the other side of the pandemic. And we're now a year on, and we're still not on the other side of the pandemic. And I suppose the question is, will we ever be on the other side of the pandemic? But things are really looking up, at least in the UK, where we're dialing in from. I know you're joining us from across Europe today. But the series lives on, and we're still bringing together thought leaders to discuss what awaits us after times of immense disruption, and what to expect from a new normalcy, if there is one, in due course. And taking a step back, in the UK, the last few years have very much been focused on the challenges and uncertainties relating to Brexit and Britain's exit from the European Union. And although many of the scenarios that we've discussed in these formats have never become reality, we finally got a trade agreement at Christmas. And now, with almost 2 months into this new relationship between, let's call them the two blocks, shall we? We can start to see potential outcomes for the UK and the EU's future relationship, and what it will mean for businesses, for example. But what is next? Well, for this complicated relationship between the two blocks, as I say, this is what we're here to discuss today. Now, for those of you who don't know the Swedish Chambers all too well, very briefly, we're a business platform, a business community. We were founded in London in 1906 by business and for business, and we connect Swedish and British businesses and entrepreneurs with other stakeholders. As do many of our partnering chambers here today, and I'm proud that we have so many of them joining us from across Europe. Today we partner with the Swedish Chambers in Estonia, France, Germany, Latvia, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Turkey. We're also proud to welcome the Stockholm and Jönköping Chambers of Commerce, and at last, the British Swedish Chamber of Commerce in Stockholm. So a virtual bonjour and guten tag to everyone, wherever you're joining us from in Europe today. Now, before I hand over to our host, Nik Gowing, I'd like to extend a sincere thanks to our sponsor, our series sponsor, Handelsbanken, and to our partner, Thinking the Unthinkable. Looking at the housekeeping rules, please have a look at this. We want an interactive conversation, so please post your questions and comments using the Q&A function. Get them in quickly so that you don't run out of time. If you experience any technical issues, please report the issue using the chat function, and my lovely team members who are very technically able will support you to their best ability. And please note that the event will be recorded and made available for members on demand. And now it's with great pleasure that I welcome our host, Nik Gowing. If you've joined us for the Emerging Stronger series before, you will be very familiar with him. Nik is the director and founder of Thinking the Unthinkable. He's former BBC World News anchor and much, much more. But we're very excited to continue working with you, Nik, and I gladly hand over this in your hands.
Thanks, Peter, and welcome to everyone from the 9 offices around Europe as well. Let me be very clear that what we want very early from you is your questions, because I can keep asking questions for the next 55 minutes, but I'd really prefer to hear from you. And I really do mean, if you get your questions in, we will get them out, and the points that you want to make can help set the agenda in ways which are probably better than me. So let's move forward. What I'd like to do, first of all, is introduce our 3 speakers and our 3 panelists. And remember, we are consumed by the pandemic. I'm not sure there will be an after-pandemic moment, but it will be living with the pandemic. But there is this other thing called Brexit, which did happen 54 days ago. And that's what we're here to look at, the new relationship between the United Kingdom, it is still a United Kingdom, and the rest of the European Union, the complexities of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, the trading problems, the economic issues, how much Britain really is a friend, as the Prime Minister keeps referring to everyone else in the world as our friends, particularly in Europe, We want to hear from you, your negatives, your positives, your questions, just basic factual questions, possibly could be very useful as well. Let me introduce who's joining me on the panel today. First of all, I'm going to ask them a couple of questions each when I go to them to Stockholm, to Charlotte Erkhammar, who is the CEO of Kreab. Welcome, Charlotte. Nice to see you again. And of course, you've been celebrating at Kreab 50 years in existence. But what kind of relationship are you seeing at the moment between Britain and the rest of Europe, as reflected in your offices, particularly here in London?
Thank you very much, and hello, everyone. Firstly, thanks for inviting me to discuss this really important issue. And I think I have to say that the title, Emerging Stronger, is an excellent title for this event, because it's the only appropriate attitude to embracing fundamental change, whether you chooses it or not. And change is, a very important part of our mission at Kreab, to help clients manage change worldwide. So as you said, we are celebrating 50 years. This year, we have been around for a long time. I have been the CEO for 16 years now. And when I started, we had 8 countries. Now we have 25 countries worldwide. And we have 500 people in 25 countries, 9 countries in Latin America and Asia. Big hubs is Tokyo, Madrid, Brussels, London, and Stockholm. And we support around 500 clients worldwide. And what we actually do and have done for 50 years now is to support clients in solving complex issues in an easy way. So we have been really, really busy, I can tell you, since the referendum in June 2016, with trying to support our clients in the different kind of withdrawal agreement, and now when we have the TCA agreement on board.
And quickly, what kind of impression, what kind of grip do they all have on the realities of Brexit, whether before what happened over Christmas with the new agreement, but also since what happened on the 1st of January, where Britain is no longer part of the European Union?
We have, our clients are it's a lot of uncertainty, of course. So it's UK, as we all know, who choose to leave the EU, and for our clients, it's a lot of uncertainty, of course, and it will become, I think Brexit will become a never-ending negotiation. If you look at the agreement today, everything is nearly focusing on companies trading with goods, and it's good with 0 tariffs and quotas, but I think it has already shown for companies that the bureaucracy has increased a lot, and with the huge costs for both time and money to fill in all the documents needed for that. And as we all know, the financial services part is another part for our clients that, let's see what will happen with the regulations in the Memorandum of Understanding end of March. But I think this will be an ongoing negotiation moving forward.
Remember what Charlotte said, it's going to be a never-ending negotiation. We're going to hear from a member of the governing Conservative Party in a moment, but first to James Sproule, who is the Chief Economist at Handelsbanken, formerly the Chief Economist of the Institute of Directors, and also briefly, James, you were at number 10. What's your reflection 54 days in when you hear what you've just heard from Charlotte about a never-ending negotiation, increased bureaucracy and so on? And before you answer the question, please do start putting your questions to us, because we've already been talking for 10 minutes. We've got 50 minutes to run. James.
Thanks, Nick. I do think that there's probably, unfortunately, a good deal of truth in what Charlotte was saying in terms of there is a lot of bureaucracy. The EU does tend to be a very rules-based organization, certainly when it suits it, and we'll likely see that going on into the future. I think on the financial services, that's also a particularly important area, and as you say, at the end of March, we're supposed to have an agreement. I think the expectations on that are very, very low indeed. I think it's notable that the equivalence is simply not going to be granted to the UK. I think it should be. I think it would be benefit to both the UK clearly, but also to Europe. But that's not the place we are, at least at the moment. So I'm afraid I'm a little bit down on some of those issues. So we are in danger of a little bit over egging the pudding here, though, because one of the things we've seen in the last few weeks is lots of businesses reporting certainly manufacturing businesses here in the UK, reporting supply chain difficulties, to which they're attributing Brexit, and for which I'm sure there is a good deal of truth. At the same time, we're also seeing record delays in supply chains into Germany, which clearly isn't being affected by Brexit. So there must be something else going on here, which is impacting global supply chains. And if we look at shipping rates and chip manufacturing, so Brexit becomes a catch-all rather than necessarily the sole reason that things are being impacted. We are living in a world economic situation which is very, very uncertain, as undoubtedly we're going to discuss in the next few minutes.
James, you used a very important word there, equivalence. Do you believe the European Union accepts the principle of equivalence between the European Union and the United Kingdom, which is now an independent sovereign nation, totally unbound to anything to do with the European Union?
No. I think that if you look at the way equivalence has been offered to the United States and it's not being offered to the UK, which clearly has exactly the same regulations, I think they're right now, it's a very political game. I would like to see it depoliticized. Let's see it moving more towards, frankly, technocrats, because they're not going to play the same sorts of games that undoubtedly they've played. We saw last week the reports of a shift in significant amounts of share trading of European shares to Amsterdam. And I think the EU would see that as a testament to the success of their approach. I don't think that's the case, but it's an ongoing discussion for that. And unfortunately, in a time of, between the pandemic and potential how are we going to get our economies, both the UK, but obviously Europe as a whole, to recover, there's a lot of tension in the political process. And that means that not every decision is as rational as I would wish it to be.
All right. Stand by, James, and also Charlotte. Let's go to Andrew Bowie, who's an MP for a Scottish constituency west of Aberdeen, the oil centre up in the north. He's also vice chairman of the Conservative Party and a relatively new arrival in the House of Commons. Welcome, Andrew. When you hear what you've just been hearing, and you're actually in Scotland at the moment, which has some interesting challenges of its own, as we'll talk about later, about the union of the United Kingdom. What's your view of what you've just heard from Charlotte and particularly from James about equivalence? No, but also never-ending negotiation. We're in for a very long haul of clarification here.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nick, and good morning from Scotland. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you and join everybody this morning. Look, I think Charlotte is right. I think that these negotiations will drag on, as negotiations with countries around the world regarding trade go on in the background at all times. I'm very keen for us to have as close a relationship with the European Union as possible. I think that's in both of our interests. And the Prime Minister has been absolutely clear. I mean, what the European Union has lost was a surly tenant. And what it has gained, we hope, is a good neighbour who's going to be able to work with it as a partner. And that is what we want to see as we develop the relationship between ourselves and the European Union, a new relationship, a newly sovereign Britain, but one that can be developed and grow stronger over time. I am disappointed that it doesn't look like equivalence is going to be granted to the United Kingdom. I do think, in terms of financial services, it would be in the interests of both the EU and the UK if it was. And as James has said, it's been granted to the United States, where they have different regulatory model. Why not grant it to the United Kingdom, where regulation is exactly the same as it is within the European Union? It can only be because there are political games being played. I find that quite depressing, because we are talking about people's jobs here, and we're talking about the strength of the economies of both the EU and the UK. So hopefully we'll be able to overcome that hurdle. Hopefully the politics will be able to be put to bed. And as James says, let the technocrats take over on that, in that field in particular. And we can move on and develop this relationship, which I think could be a really positive relationship for the wider world if we get it right.
We've been going 54 days as an independent sovereign nation, the United Kingdom. And in some ways, this is very technical, particularly for all our Nordic friends and so on. But how much have you been worried, concerned about where this is going, particularly with Northern Ireland and the relationship with the Republic of Ireland, and what is happening in the North Sea? In many ways, it's a very technical British issue. On the other hand, it indicates potentially a new relationship between certainly Northern Ireland and the Republic, and therefore the European Union.
Yes, of course it does. But as Nick, as you said, it has only been 54 days. We are at the very early stages of this new age. and there are going to be bumps in the road, and we're seeing them right now. But we need to overcome those bumps. We need to find out exactly what's working, what isn't working. There are negotiations right now regarding the Northern Irish Protocol. That's the agreement that lets Northern Ireland remain within the customs union of the European Union whilst maintaining its place within the single market of the UK. There are negotiations on how to make that work better and make it be a more smooth relationship between the three organisations. And of course, the situation in the North Sea and exporting of goods from the North Sea into Europe, of course, is another issue. So look, there are going to be bumps along the road. We're going to have to overcome them. As Charlotte says, these negotiations are going to go on, but I'm very keen and I'm very hopeful that as the months and years progress, this relationship will develop, and as two mature institutions, which the United Kingdom and the European Union are, we can overcome these difficulties and make it work for both of us.
I'm going to just put this to you because I'm left with the feeling that that Charlotte and Kreab are going to have significant business for years to come, including others probably watching this elsewhere in Europe. But let me put to you bluntly, is hope really a policy? Hope, a relationship with the European Union, which is only 20 miles at its narrowest point between the United Kingdom and France. In other words, is hope really the way forward, as we're seeing in so many areas at the moment of disappointment? And we just heard from Charlotte the enormous amount of paperwork that's having to be filled in, even paperwork being rejected when the color of the ink is wrong. That kind of thing, you may be hopeful about it, but business is suffering at the moment, and that'll be on the minds of many people on this webinar.
Well, absolutely, Nick. And of course, without hope, what have you got? I mean, you've got nothing. So we have to have hope to begin with. And hopefully, using that word once again, with optimism and positivity on both sides, we can get down to the business of sorting the real issues that are facing businesses. We've got to have that optimism to begin with from both sides if we're going to actually deal with the crux of the issues, which, as you say, go down to the minutiae.
All right, well, let me shift that. Let me shift that immediately to Charlotte. Do you see optimism that coming from Andrew, representing the Conservative government?
I think we have always to be optimists, but I think many companies and businesses will have to manage divergence of regulatory approaches right now. But there will be, of course, many areas where UK and EU will stay aligned. But I think the key to this is to understand really the politics on both EU and the UK side, and as this will continue to drive the regulatory outcome. Long-running negotiations mean long-running uncertainty, and as James said, much of this is and will be driven by politics. Business dislikes uncertainty. Part of our work is to support that and the EU and UK side politics to our clients and try to give them much certainty as we can.
Right. Well, questions are coming in already. So please send your idea now. Don't leave it to the last moment and complain I didn't get a chance to ask it. There's one from an anonymous person. If you'd like to give your name, it would be helpful, because unless you want to remain completely in the dark with a bag over your head. This from an anonymous attendee. Does it make sense to equalize an independent nation's needs with those of a coalition of nations? Bear that in mind, James, because your view, particularly on the border issue and what is happening in the North Sea, what is happening with Northern Ireland and what's happening with the Republic, how much is that indicative of something much bigger as a problem looming for the United Kingdom?
I think the UK does have some big problems. I mean, I think Andrew's in a far better place to answer those problems and the potential challenges we face with Scotland. And I wouldn't ever hold myself out as somebody who has any deep expertise on the question about Northern Ireland. But the question of...
You know the economic implications, don't you?
Yes, but the economic implications aren't always clear either. I mean, we've seen lots of economic forecasts about what Brexit would mean, some of which have come true, some of which have been quite wide of the mark. And so my view is that looking forward from here, what's going to matter in the post-COVID world is how dynamic and how agile economies are, and some parts of Europe are really agile. I think the UK is pretty agile, and that's going to be great. And other parts are going to face bigger challenges. But no, getting back to your question of, does it make sense for every country is going to be looking out for its own best interest, because of course the politicians are all looking to be re-elected, and they're all trying to represent their country in the best way that they think possible. And I think that's absolutely normal. So I do think there's lots and lots of room for cooperation between the UK and the EU, but there are going to be areas in which each side sees particularly vital things which sometimes will confuse people, in so much as you're talking about the fishing. Why do we put so much pressure on fishing? Because it becomes a totemic. It's not about the economic impact of it. It's about the broader things it says about our country, the broader thing it said about those coastal communities, etc. It's about the environmental views for some people. There's a lot of things that can inform those opinions about when is it time to stand up. And each country needs to appreciate, parts of the European Union are very concerned about their own culture and their language in the way that obviously the UK is concerned about. So everybody's got these touchstone, particularly sensitive things, and one needs to be very aware of them. But that doesn't mean we're not going to be able to have a lot of cooperation, a lot of trade, a lot of very, very positive views of each other in the longer term. It's just, but we certainly have a teething, a bit of teething troubles at the moment.
Just one thing, given that you did work in number 10, David Frost, Lord Frost, has now been appointed as a Minister of State in the House of Lords to the Cabinet, which surprised a lot of people, removing the responsibility for Europe from Michael Gove. It's a technical British political question, but on the other hand, it's perhaps indicative of how the politics of this is going to get even harder line. Andrew, I'll come to you in a moment on this, but your view quickly, James.
I think it certainly represents a realization, if it was ever not realized, that these negotiations are going to continue to be pretty forthright and hard, at least for the immediate future. And that's why David Frost was put back into that position. He's somebody who knows the ins and outs of all of these negotiations intimately. I mean, I can't think of anybody who would know them more than David himself. And Michael had a wider range of responsibilities, so they need somebody to concentrate just on that.
But does David Frost do compromise?
Well, the question could be easily turned each way. Compromise is probably best arrived at when both sides are feeling that they've got a full grip on the situation. We did get that deal on Christmas Eve, and that was great. But it was touch and go when both sides realized, okay, here's the ultimate position that from which they're not going to retreat. Then we got a workable deal. So maybe we need a bit more of that. Certainly the Prime Minister may be thinking that at the moment.
Andrew, a couple of questions here already, but let me summarize them along the lines of, is Britain going to remain particularly hard line? And that's why I raised the Lord Frost issue, because the surprise that a member of the House of Lords is elevated to the Cabinet, but also with a very clear mandate: don't mess around, don't allow Europe to mess around with us. Is that the way that many viewers, those watching this, should read this?
Well, I mean, the European Union is well known as a tough negotiator. It plays hardball in trade negotiations, and I think if Britain's interests are going to be served, we need to be able to play the same game. And James is absolutely right. There's nobody that knows the intricacies of negotiations with the EU better in government right now than Lord Frost, and that's why I think it's a very good thing he's been appointed to the position he has regarding taking Europe away from Michael Gove. He's got the big issue of keeping Scotland in the Union to deal with, which is his number one.
Come on to that later.
At the minute, so that's why his role has changed somewhat. And in terms of promoting somebody from the House of Lords into the Cabinet, it's been done many times before. Peter Mandelson, a former EU Trade Commissioner, was in Gordon Brown's cabinet from the House of Lords. So for those watching overseas, it's not the most unusual thing in the world for a government to draw in expertise from elsewhere. And I think the expertise that David will bring to the table and to the negotiations will be very, very valuable indeed.
All right, let me pick up on questions now. One for you, Charlotte, from Bengt Skarstrom from Reshape. It's very blunt about Kreab. Are Kreab embracing change or lobbying for change on Europe?
We don't have to lobby for change. Change is the only thing that happens. It's nothing permanent than change, as we all know from the old quota. So I think it's like that. But I think it's change will always happen, and I think now it's the UK have left the EU, and I think it's the same neighbors we have. So I think on both sides we have to see how to deal with one another. But at the same time, the UK has been very clear that it is a sovereign, independent nation, as you said to begin with, Nick, and it will make its own rules. It will not be a rule taker. So everything will be about politics, I think, moving forward. And it will be different kind of views, both from the UK side and from the EU side, I think.
All right, well, let me pick up Daniel Minnie from Essity. Talking about James's comment on increased share trading in Amsterdam, now passing the United Kingdom from London. If it doesn't reflect a response to Brexit, what is driving it? The comment from Daniel is, I think the media implied it was a response to Brexit. James?
Oh, I think it was, yeah. I think it was. It was an area in which the EU could mandate the trading moved, and the trading did move, without question. That's the trading venue itself is now Amsterdam for much, not always. Obviously, all London's still important, but it's not. It's Amsterdam has done very well in capturing a portion of that trade. Will London still be the financial centre for Europe? I believe it will, for a whole range of reasons, which we can go into, not least language and legal status. But it's very, very difficult to unseat a strong cluster. We'll have to see what happens in future, but I'm pretty optimistic about London's longer-term future.
So, Andrew, you'll say we can live with it, of course, but what is your gut feeling about what this signals? The ascendancy of Amsterdam and maybe not decline, but the holding firm of London. In other words, London being bypassed or overcome.
Well, I think that competition is always a good thing. I think it's really good to see other cities and financial hubs growing across Europe, and I think London will just have to up its game over the coming years and not
what does it have to do?
Business just to flow to it. Well, I think that obviously we'll have to see how the negotiations regarding equivalence go over the next while. But like Britain's policy on trade in general and on foreign policy in general at the minute, I think London has to look globally to attract business from the rest of the world and not be as reliant on business from Europe as maybe it has been very comfortable in getting over the past 10, 20, 30 years. I'm quite confident that the City of London, given its position geographically, given English as its the dominant language, given the legal status, I think it will succeed and grow in the years to come. And I think that these bumps in the road are bumps that we're going to have to overcome, but competition on the continent of Europe is good. Now, it's good to see Amsterdam doing well. Regarding the initial comment about whether or not it's caused by Brexit, of course, I think that this is absolutely a result of Brexit. But I think James was making the point that not all the issues regarding the flow of goods and services overseas at the minute can be attributed to Brexit. Brexit is seemingly a catch-all for every issue that's facing the continent at this time. If you look at fish, just for example, seafood exports from the UK, everybody's saying that the trouble exporting fish and the price of fish is down to our leaving the European Union and getting a bad deal, as they would put it, for the fishing industry. That's quite obviously not the case. We've got a global pandemic. Every fish restaurant in Europe is shut down. Nobody is importing fish because nobody is buying fish. So that is one of the other reasons and one of the other situations that is facing the country right now. So I think James's point was that, yes, there are issues caused by Brexit, but not every problem on the global stage right now facing us economically is as a result of Britain leaving the European Union.
You've all, I think, in one way or another expressed, well, English is the dominant language. I've got to tell you, there are two questions here about exactly that. From Christine Spate from LMI Translations. Is there really a probability that English will no longer be an official language in the EU? If yes, how will it impact the already heavy burden of UK companies doing business with the European Union? And Christaps Galitis, also from LMI, looks to me like there's a push here. Post-Brexit world, there's a chance English not be an official language of the EU. Will all official documentation need to be translated into other languages? What's the reality there, James, do you think?
There's a wonderful film a number of years ago called A Beautiful Mind about an economist who talks about how the second best solution can be the one that comes through, because everybody has to give up on their first best to go to the second best. So imagine a world in which English was no longer the lingua franca of almost all of Europe. Well, what's the alternative? Is everybody going to learn another one in order to be able to communicate? I'm certain there will be people who push for the candidature of that, but I'm do think that it's the second language of the vast majority of people of Europe have learnt, and therefore it's going to continue to be the working language for business, not least because, of course, all of our brilliant Scandinavian colleagues are so fantastically good at learning English that they don't necessitate us learning Swedish or Danish or anything like that. So I'm afraid I think it's going to continue to be English. And there really
Charlotte, are you beginning to prepare some of your staff for a different language?
No, we still have English, but Spanish is actually our second language within Kreab. But I think, you know, London will always remain a global city, even if we have seen many, you know, both American investment funds and banks with headquarters in London moving out with subsidiaries in Europe at other places to be able to avoid complicated things. But I think you know, all these details and they are crucial. But I think we have to look at what does post-Brexit UK actually mean. You know, UK will play a big role this year with hosting two of the most important meetings. We have the G7 meeting in Cornwall in June, and then the COP26 in Glasgow in November. But what will happen after that? That is, you know, the uncertainty.
All right, Andrew, do you have a view of whether English is going to be sidelined into another language?
Well, it's obviously for the European Union to decide, but I would think that that would very much demonstrate it was cutting up its nose to spite its face if that was the case. English isn't just an official language of the EU, it is the second language of most of the world, and it's the language of business. And we've just spoken about the COP26 and the G7. The language that they will be speaking around the table, these leaders, will be English. When they're thrashing out a negotiation. The language that the EU negotiates with many other countries around the world when it's negotiating trade deals is English. And James is absolutely right about the language that most people in the world learn as a second language is English. I have a Swedish wife. The reason that I'm not speaking Swedish this morning, not least because I think it's probably easier for everybody that I'm speaking English, is because Scandinavians learn and speak English so very well. And that is the case very much. And is a growing across the rest of the world. So it's obviously a decision for the EU to make if they decide to make English not the official second language. But I think it would be a very strange decision if it was to do so.
Yeah, and just to interrupt you, I think English is the most widely spoken language in all institutions today. So it will be really hard to change.
When I worked in Brussels, the language that the Italian would speak to the Pole would be English. Yeah. It is just the easiest second language for everybody to speak, and I think that will continue.
All right, so we have a very strong consensus there. Let's move on to a question from Hamid Lajivadi from the American Baltic Investments Group. Many believe the difficulty of doing business is based on the EU's policy wanting to make Brexit difficult, so it will not become a model for other potential exiters. Any validity now that the divorce is officially over, which of course raises the question, which is whether this session should really be about 54 days after Brexit, the implications for the European Union. What's your view on that, Charlotte?
I really hope EU will keep together. I think we need that with all geopolitical issues we have, you know, with the strained relationships with US and China and Europe and China. And also how we deal with Russia. So hopefully it will be sold out. We are still, as I said, neighbors. And, you know, what is good for businesses and society we have to deal on. That is, you know, moving forward. That's why it will be a number of different kind of discussions and negotiations moving forward to keep it together.
Do you think, James and Andrew, do you think there's any mood on Whitehall in London for the government to try to undermine the solidity of the European Union? Is that part of any policy, James?
No, I've not seen any evidence of that at all. I think the UK government is determined to try and be a good friend to the EU. Yes, certainly we'll negotiate hard for our own interests, but we have no interest whatsoever in seeing chaos breaking up part of the EU.
It's also interesting to interrupt again. What
Please
will
do.
happen with the independence with Scotland and Catalonia, for example? What do you think?
We'll come on to that in a moment. We'll come on to that in a moment.
Okay.
About the union of the United Kingdom. But Andrew, just
Because
to be
that
clear.
is an important issue regarding to keep
Absolutely.
EU
There's a
together.
question here about it already. Andrew, but just to be clear, is there any wish within the United Kingdom, let's keep calling it the United Kingdom, to weaken the European Union?
Absolutely not. I mean, we are very clear that we want to see a strong and successful European Union. An economically successful European Union makes for an economically successful United Kingdom. It's our closest trading partner, our strongest ally on just about every issue facing the world today. We are in alignment with the European Union, and so we want it to succeed and go further. This was about Britain's self-determination. It wasn't about trying to undermine the solidity or the strength of the European Union. It was about Britain deciding for itself what was best for itself. We are not in the position of determining what is best for other countries in the EU. And if those countries that are in the EU want to stay in the EU, then we wish them all the best, and we hope that it's a success.
It seems to be part of the phrase book of this government that actually, whenever Europe is referred to, they talk about our European friends. Do they feel like they're friends at the moment?
Yeah, yes, Andrew. I think they do. Sorry, yes, Nick, I think they do, actually. There's a huge difference between our relationship between the institutions of the European Union and our relationship between individual European capitals and individual Europeans, be that businesses, governments, or whatever. And I think that we are close friends with Europe, both on an individual country level and in terms of businesses working collaboratively and with other European businesses across the continent. So yes, we are very good friends with Europe, and I hope that friendship will grow and flourish over the years, given we've had this difficult few years since the Brexit referendum.
And James, from your time inside Number 10 particularly, is there a genuine respect of friends, people you can sit in a park with and have a coffee with at 2 meters distance?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there is one of the things, and Nick, you know this very well, that within in political echelons, both in the UK, but in all those countries, and on a cross-party basis, there's an enormous amount of these people, not obviously recently, but meeting up and going to conferences, and they know each other well, and they create a lot of friendships, and those friendships endure. And I think it's a really important part of politics and policy that sort of thing continues to go on. And by God, aren't we all looking forward to this autumn when we might start again?
And Charlotte, just again, that word friends, you're a regular visitor, or have been a regular visitor to the United Kingdom and London particularly. Does it feel still like friendship, even if it's damn tough at times?
Absolutely. European businesses are also hurt by bad trade terms. And I think that EU does not want Brexit to be really bad. That is absolutely obvious. Of course, we have to find the best way out of this, because this is something we have, or at least UK have put us into. So let's see what will happen. And I think it's good intentions from both sides, but I think it's really important for everyone to really follow this carefully politically, both what's happened in the UK and what's happening in the EU to find the best solutions moving forward.
All right, let me just give you a comment here from Jan Hollemans from KPMG in the Netherlands. We communicate with clients and colleagues abroad always in English. That won't change. Now, let me pick up what we were going to talk about anyway, but Charlotte, you brought it top of the agenda along with an anonymous contribution here. Can the United Kingdom stay together in the long run, or are there any deal-breaking questions that eventually could divide the UK? Well, I warn you, we've only got 20 minutes left. And every day is a day of drama up in Scotland, Andrew. You're in a unique position of being a Conservative member of Parliament in a country, in part of the United Kingdom, which is dominated by the Scottish National Party. What's your view about the durability of the United Kingdom of 4 countries? Yeah,
well, unsurprisingly, my view is that Scotland is very much better off as a part of the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom is very much better off having Scotland as an integral part of it. Regarding your question, do I see the United Kingdom enduring and Scotland remaining a part of it into the future? Yes, I do, actually. I think that there is a temptation in the minds of many Scots to see Scotland as being a successful small European nation. And I'm not one of these people that doesn't think Scotland could be that. But I also believe that Scotland gets a much better deal from being an integral part of the 5th largest economy in the world, with all that that means for business, for jobs, for security, and all the rest of it. And although we have seen over the past 12 months a number of polls showing support for Scottish independence being in the ascendancy and actually being the view of sometimes the majority, that is beginning to slip now. I think it was a result of a confluence of different events, Brexit, coronavirus, and I think that very much the pendulum is swinging back in the other direction, and that Scotland will remain as a part of the United Kingdom for many years to come. And frankly, I think that's a very good thing.
Could I put it to you, though, you have to say that you are a member of Parliament for the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Yes,
and what we're looking for is a pragmatic assessment, given what is happening in Northern Ireland at the moment, given the greater streak of independence we're seeing from Wales as well, and we're about to see later today from Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister. Isn't there a reality that you've got to confront, which is it's going to be increasingly difficult for you?
Absolutely. Goodness me. I don't want to make light of the situation. We've got a fight in our hands. Those of us that believe that Scotland is better placed in the United Kingdom have got a fight in our hands to make that case. And unionists across the United Kingdom have got to fight very hard, making the case both for Northern Ireland and for Wales as well, and to combat a lack of interest in England on this very issue. Because let us be under no illusions, if Scotland voted to leave the United Kingdom, it wouldn't just be a small local difficulty in Scotland, it would represent a huge political crisis at every level of government in the United Kingdom. It would be the end of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, as we know that. And of course, that would have serious implications for everybody involved in the governance of this country. So yes, we've got a fight in our hands. Yes, we are dealing with very canny operators in the form of Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP and the government in Edinburgh. But can we win this fight? Yes. Do I think we will win this fight? Absolutely. And should we win this fight? Undoubtedly.
Would you be prepared to concede that the Northern Ireland Protocol and the pandemic and the greater nationalism we've seen from each of the other three governments, that in its own way has put additional stresses on it all?
Yes, absolutely. And that has means that we've just got to be much stronger and fight harder to make our case. And if we can't make a positive case for the union continuing, or if we can't make a positive case that Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and England are better together, then frankly, we should all pack up and go home, because the facts there are as plain as day that we are much stronger and better together, and then we would be apart.
Which raises the question where home is to pack up and go to. But Charlotte, you raised the question a few minutes ago and I cut you short. What's your view? What kind of advice are you giving to your clients? And I'll come to James in a moment.
Now, of course, it's uncertainty, because if the Scottish independency would also increase the uncertainty and the problems for business. So that is...
Do you see the pace picking up on the reality of an increasingly disunited kingdom?
I think that is a challenge for the UK to keep it together. You have the North Island, you have the Scottish Scotland, you have everything. So it's really important to have a strategy moving forward to not generate more trouble than we already have done for businesses.
James, what kind of advice are you giving Handelsbanken, and what's your view, given that there is the possibility of a second referendum in Scotland, which could lead to independence, which could lead to an application of for Scotland rejoining the European Union? Do you think that's likely, possible?
It's possible, certainly. It's likely. I don't believe that it is. I would say that I was born in the province of Quebec, actually, which went through its own independence gyrations sort of half a generation ago. And it was a distinctly unhealthy situation. It led to a lot of animosity. It's taken a long time to repair that type of division within that society. And it's unfortunate. We see lots of things going on right now where there are people within the political situation in Scotland who are looking to try and divide the society. I don't think that's a very good idea. From the bank's point of view, what I just said was my own personal views, but from the bank's point of view, we would deal with whatever we have to in terms of making sure that we service clients, etc. within Scotland. Of course we would. But do I think it would be a positive for the Scottish economy? I think there would be, as Charlotte was saying, a lot of uncertainty there, and that's never very good for business.
All right, we've got two big issues to cover in a moment. You've got 15 minutes to go, so please, if you're sitting on your hands and you're saying they still haven't asked about this question, then please get it to me in the next few minutes. Then at least I have a chance of putting it in somewhere. Firstly, this from Andrew Walton of Saab. Based on Boris Johnson's speech to the special Munich Security Conference on Friday, he spoke last after President Biden. How likely is the UK to be successful in securing its place as a global player outside the European Union? He mentions the speech by the Prime Minister, the UK's ability of putting legal rapid sanction in Myanmar, negotiating a better contract from AstraZeneca than the European Union. Is there a degree of over wishful thinking here in Downing Street about where this can leave Britain or not? What's your view, Andrew?
Well, I think the United Kingdom, even when it was a member of the European Union, demonstrated that it had huge sway and political muscle on the world stage. It acts imposing sanctions on various countries through its positions on the United Nations permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council, as a founder member of NATO, obviously as a member of the Commonwealth, and engaging with many different nations around the world with whom it has long and abiding links. So I think that the idea that Britain is suddenly becoming a global player again, having been in the European, now it's freed from the European Union, is actually false, because it was already a global player whilst also being in the European Union. I think we have demonstrated with our agreement with AstraZeneca that we can move nimbly and quickly, and that's of course obvious. And one nation acting by itself is much easier it has it much easier than a coalition of 27 nations trying to negotiate a contract. But no, absolutely. I think the future is bright for Britain on the world stage, but Britain never left the world stage. I was never one of these people that believed that simply because Britain was in the European Union, its voice on the global stage was being stifled. It certainly wasn't, and we will continue to just build on our record of success over the past decades.
Charlotte, what's your view? Obviously, you think of Nordic-Baltic interest more than the United Kingdom, but given the prominence of the United Kingdom and the fact you do have a big office here in Covent Garden, what's your view? What's your perception of whether Britain is diminished by Brexit? It's not just 54 days; it's a year and 54 in many ways. Yeah. What's your feeling that
UK has left a large trading bloc, actually, that has a lot of economic power, but now it has more freedom to act quickly and nimbly, I think. Do
you see that?
Britain is I see that. When we had the call the other day, we now the world, at least many countries, are looking at Britain now regarding the vaccination and the strategy that Boris Johnson gave to the nation yesterday, to try to also copy that in many places in Europe. But Britain is an important but mid-sized world economy, and there are many positives. The highest defense spending in Europe, and serious security and intelligence capability, but Britain has still not articulated its post-Brexit strategy. So I think we have to wait for that.
Well, we're going to have a big review, which is going to be published in about 2 weeks, so we'll have a better idea. But I think in the 15 minutes, Boris Johnson speaking right at the end in Munich on Friday, he was incredibly self-confident, reading from a script, but he left an impression which surprised me, of how confident Britain can be and the reasons for it. It's worth reading. But Andrew Walton of Saab has just come back. Following Brexit, Sweden has lost a powerful ally at the EU top table. The obvious replacements are Germany or France, which should be more attractive, and why? James, your view about Britain's geopolitical role?
Thanks, Nick. I think that there is clearly an enormous desire to push ahead with that. And I think it's very interesting looking at the way in which public opinion has sort of, not just public, but sort of commentators' opinion has shifted on UK-US relations, which back when, just before President Biden was elected, it was seen as being, if he's elected, it's going to be very bad for the UK. He's Irish-American. He's not going to like the UK. So he wanted to get close to Germany, want to get close to the EU at the UK's expense. That's certainly not the way it's looking now. I think the US is pretty annoyed with the Nord Stream. I think the US wishes that the European Union was standing up to China a bit more. I think Boris is quite confident as a result of the fact that we're sending a carrier strike group out to the Pacific. And it's notable that in that carrier strike group will be a Dutch frigate. So
and an American as well.
And an American as well. And so there is that cooperation, where we see opportunities to cooperate. That's undoubtedly the sort of thing the government's going to try to be pushing forward. So I think there is a possibility for real leadership. It's not going to be, leadership of the 19th century Britain does it alone. That's clearly completely gone, and nobody in Downing Street's looking for that. But they are looking for, are there areas where we can make a difference? And we think that there probably are. The Downing Street thinks that there probably are.
But you speak, of course, as a reserve naval officer, and the British carrier, the Queen Elizabeth, is going on a 20,000-mile cruise, ostensibly to re-establish greater power in the Indo-Pacific area, and particularly against the Chinese. Does sending a carrier which costs £3 billion to confront the Chinese, who've got a navy which expands by the size of the British Navy every year, is that really geopolitically logical?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that we're not going to be going to war over this whole thing, but it's a method of the UK showing key allies in the Indo-Pacific area that we are interested in it, that we are willing to send our military assets out there to work with them, and in a whole range of areas. And so, yeah, I think it's a positive sign. If we never went and we just gave lots of reassurances, verbal reassurances, I think there would be every reason for them to say, well, actually, how about some real life on the ground evidence of it? And here we're having real life on the ground evidence of Britain's commitment to that part of the world.
Okay, right. We have 8 minutes to run, and Peter would like to have a quick word at the end. But Peter has actually asked the next question, probably the last question, which is really of profound importance on the climate emergency and sustainability and green and so on. And the United Kingdom being currently the chair of the UN Security Council, the G7 chair as well, chairing COP26 along with the Italians later this year in November in Glasgow. But Peter asks, Sweden and the UK have a lot in common in terms of the green agenda and the fight on climate change, the climate emergency. How will the UK's interest in working with its European neighbours as a group individually change in the coming decade? In other words, I'm going back to where Charlotte introduced this about half an hour ago. Is it probable that even with Brexit, a combination of all these other international roles, which have come by rotation as much as anything else, probably by luck, that in its own way is going to reassert the United Kingdom's position of influence? What's your view, Andrew?
Yeah, I think it is. You're absolutely right. Sweden and Britain have a lot in common in terms of tackling the green agenda. Sweden has taken great strides in developing new technologies to drive us towards a net zero future, and Britain was the first country in Europe to commit to a net zero economy by 2050, enshrining that in legislation. But it actually it ties in very nicely to what we were just speaking about, sending you might not see it to begin with, but sending the Queen Elizabeth and the carrier strike group out to the South China Sea, in demonstrating that we are willing to stand up and defend the values that we care about, which is freedom of navigation, free trade. We are therefore signaling to the world that Britain is ready to work with our partners to achieve what we need to achieve to make this world a better, more secure and safer place. And that is exactly the same attitude that we are taking in terms of fighting climate change. We are working with partners and countries around the world that share the same vision as us, of a green future, a net zero future. And alongside us, Sweden absolutely stands out as one of the natural allies in this fight, and we look forward to working with Sweden and with all the other countries that join us around the world at COP26, building on what we agreed in Paris. And it's great to have the Americans back on board. Not that most of corporate America or many states in America actually paid much attention to Donald Trump's removing them from the Paris Accords anyway, but it's good to have them officially back on board so they can all move towards forward in the right direction. And I think that this whole idea of standing up for our values, working with partners, demonstrating that we are willing to do what it takes to make this world, as I said, a much better place, is something that I think Britain will be doing much more in the years to come.
Personal comment, if I may. I do sense very strongly that there has been an absolute sort of turbocharging of the whole issue of green and the climate emergency in the last months and last weeks, led by the United Kingdom. And they're absolutely determined that even with all the logistic nightmare of trying to get people to Glasgow, or will it be done virtually, there's a determination that that COP26 and Glasgow 2021 is going to be an absolute turning point towards net zero. Quickly, Andrew, is that your view too?
Yes, it absolutely is. I don't know if it's just come in the past few weeks. I was in Downing Street with the Prime Minister when it was decided they were going to bid for it, they were going to hold it in Glasgow. And I'm very glad that in the past few months it shot back up the agenda again, because it is the issue facing the world. After COVID, it is the #1 issue that we need to get right because of the threat that it poses, not just our global economy, but the environment and life on this planet.
Charlotte, I come to you, and I have in front of me the 50th anniversary, Creating Value Through Communication. But when it comes to Kreab and your view about how Britain will position itself, or whether it'll blow it up, in other words, fail to actually deliver on so many expectations, what's your feeling that maybe in 8 or 9 months, particularly with COP26, that actually Britain will have reasserted itself globally and in Europe, despite the hassles of Brexit?
I think climate change and sustainability are key to our clients, has been for a long time. And I think that UK now has a chance to lead the global response thanks to COP26. That they will, even if it's hard to I think, negotiate trade agreements for a single country to other, just one by one, it's easier to negotiate trade agreements as an EU part, of course. But I think, as I said, London will always become a global important financial city, and I think it's both, as I said, the EU and the UK, both intentions to make this moving forward in the best way possible for businesses and for society.
James, your thought, a combination of the pandemic, horrific though it's been, the UN Security Council, G7 and COP26, do you feel that that's going to swing the doubters in the UK's direction, or is that really over-optimistic?
It's a very, very good question. I'm afraid I think it's a little bit over-optimistic for some, at least. I think most people are willing to look forward, and that's really, I think, where both the UK and the EU have an enormous amount, both in common in terms of a very common goal, but also in terms of it's the people who are looking forward, who are looking for the technological solutions to meeting that net zero target, because nobody's saying that you could move to net zero and become poorer. It's going to be moved to net zero because we've got technological change which allows us to continue to be prosperous whilst moving to net zero. That's the ideal. And that's going to require a lot of investment. It's going to require a lot of technological capabilities. And the UK has a really important part to play. So does the EU, quite clearly. So does the US and other parts of the world. So it needs to be a collaborative, cooperative thing. And that is sort of, for those people who are looking forward at solutions, practical solutions that are going to be acceptable to the mass of people across the developed world and the developing world, I think that's the route forward. And that's clearly one we as a bank are very, very active in financing a lot of that. And that's something we're very proud of.
James, thank you. One final thought from Håkan Bavestrand from Lufthansa. No need to comment on it because we're out of time. But as James mentioned, an agile economy is increasingly important to compete globally, especially in the financial sector. To me, it seems like an increasingly tall order for the EU tanker moving forward, given that growth is likely to come from outside the European Union. So I think it's a matter of speed versus size. I think speed, entrepreneurship and agility are more important, unless, as you mentioned, politics permanently get in the way. My apologies to Bernie van Leeuwen from SKV. A very technical question about universities there, Bernie, a little too complicated to get into in the limited time we have, but thanks for the question. And thanks for all the other questions as well. And thank you as well to Charlotte, to James and to Andrew for a very vibrant hour. It doesn't seem like an hour, but we got through an enormous number of issues. And I'm struck by what Charlotte said right at the beginning, worried about the never-ending negotiations that we now face on so many issues 54 days after Brexit finally became final. Let me hand back to Peter.
Thank you, Nick. And to follow up on what you said, I think it's nice to see the whole Brexit conversation moving into a new phase. As in any divorce, it's, you know, you need to get through the divorce bill, you need to get through the separation, but now it's nice to actually start discussing what kind of relationship we want to have moving forward. So I certainly look forward to that, even though there's lots of conversations to come and negotiations too. Huge thanks to our speakers, to Andrew, Charlotte and James. Thanks for joining us. Nick, thank you as always for steering the conversation as well as you always do. I want to thank our series sponsor, Handelsbanken, and our partners, Thinking the Unthinkable, and our partnering chambers across Europe. And finally, a huge thanks to you for joining us and for participating actively and asking great questions. The next Emerging Stronger will be in May, when we'll be discussing whether it actually does take a pandemic for us to accelerate innovation. And you'll see we're joined by the CHRO at Spotify, the CEO at Gant, and the CTO at Vodafone. So until then, thank you very much for joining us and have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.